Hey, there's an old adage about boating. It says you can tell somebody where to meet you, you can tell somebody when to meet you, but you can't tell them both. And that's really held true. We left over a week ago from Palm Coast and we've made it down to Palm City. And we really wanted to be at least in Miami and maybe over to the Bahamas by now. But we ran into a couple of opportunities, you could say. One, we mentioned earlier the turbocharger was out on the starboard engine, so we have that ordered. It's supposed to be in today before 3 o'clock. Hopefully we'll get that installed. And as much as we've appreciated being in this wonderful protected harbor right off from the St. Lucie River, when it's been cold, it's been windy, and the intra-coastal has been really rough, we're ready to go. But we haven't just been doing nothing these last 4 or 5 days. We've been doing some boat chores, reprovisioning, reorganizing a few things, and trying to make the boat just a little bit more efficient and a little bit more suited to our layout. I thought I would talk about two things. One, the route we plan on taking to the Bahamas, and two, what's optimal for a weather window to go over to the Bahamas. Bimini is roughly 55 miles off the coast of Miami, and you cross over the Gulf Stream when you go there, and that presents some challenges. Gulf Stream typically runs south to north, and it can be as slow as 2 knots or as much as 4 knots. And a northern wind really picks up big waves. So that's kind of a little bit on the weather, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But the routes to the Bahamas are just as important. We've exclusively used the boating app from Garmin, Navionics, for all of our routes so far. And one of the things that we learned is that when you're heading over to the Bahamas, there's another program called Aquamaps, which seems to work a little better. And we were kind of tipped off on this and started asking questions after we noticed that Navionics routed us south of Miami, so in effect going against the Gulf Stream. And then between two little islands, one called Gun Key, one called Cat Key, and then bearing north to head over towards the Berry Islands. And then after some people told us about Aquamaps, we tried Aquamaps, and Aquamaps lets us float north with the Gulf Stream and go around Bimini. We go just around an area called North Rock, and North Rock lets you go across the Gulf Stream without fighting the current, and then you go around North Rock, and then you just head east over to Great Harbor. So that's the route that we plan on going, and we'll have some pictures hopefully thrown in there of what we're going to do. The other thing about Cat Island or Cat Key is it's a very exclusive private island. That's where all the mega yachts go, and depending on who you talk to, it's not really easy to get a marina in there. It's also insanely expensive, and you just about need an invite to be able to easily visit Cat Key, at least on a boat. The other thing I want to talk about is weather. Weather heading over, just 2 days ago, we had 20-foot seas with max waves of up to 40 feet between Miami and Bimini. Obviously, on a boat that is 34 feet long, you really don't want to be out there in that. The optimal waves would be from the west going east, and then also 2 feet or less. Your average wave height would be 2 feet, which would mean some of your peak waves would be 4 feet. And ideally, you want those coming from the west, going to the east, and you want the period of those waves being longer. You don't want short, choppy waves. You want 6 seconds, 8 seconds between the waves, and that gives you something that you can ride along or surf on. And if you're going into those waves, let's say they are coming from the east, you want a longer period between the waves because that will keep you from bouncing as much. So if you're going into 8-second waves that are 2 feet, and you might reduce that time to say 3 seconds, depending on how fast you're going. So weather's a really important thing that's out there, and I'm going to put some pictures in that'll show what the waves look like and what the weather looks like, and hopefully we'll be able to head down to Biscayne and stay there a couple of days waiting for our weather window, and then as soon as we have roughly a 48-hour window, we'll be able to cut over. You need about 12 hours for the waters to calm down. You need about 20 hours to cross with a good buffer. And then ideally, you want another 8 to 12 hours after that just to have some protection in case you run out of a weather window.